Kumbhalgarh, formidable citadel of the great Maharana of mighty Mewar, with its legendary, impregnable walls.
The walls of Kumbhalgarh are just magnificent. You can have 8 horsemen riding abreast alongside the top of the wall together. You know, you can fight an entire battle up on top of them.
Behind the walls are some of the finest architectural wonders of the Rajput world and its dark history. The Aravalis, among the oldest mountains in the world, stretching from Gujarat to Delhi. Its tallest peaks are in Rajasthan, rugged terrain where hardened warriors battled over great empires. The perfect location for defensive strongholds. None more impressive than the great citadel of Kumbhalgarh. Kilometer after kilometer of fort walls snake across craggy outcrops. So dramatic that many mistakenly believe it is second only to the Great Wall of China. But Kumbhalgarh doesn't need a false narrative to make it a wonder of the world.
It's simply not true that Kumbhalgarh is the second longest wall in the world. It is, however, one of the most spectacular fortresses you'll see anywhere. And it's spectacular both for what it is and for where it is. It's right up in the Aravallis hills, it's surrounded by forests, and that's the point of Kumbhalgarh. Kumbhalgarh was built as the final impregnable place of defense in case of danger.
Kumbhalgarh was the ultimate stronghold of the Sisodia Rajputs of Mewar, a staggering architectural achievement. The Sisodias claim mythical descent from Lord Ram's son, Love. They are one of the oldest Rajput dynasties in India. Till date, there have been 78 generations of Ranas who have presided over the Sisodias. For many, the most memorable is Maharana Pratap, who was born in this simple home in 1540. But it was his equally great ancestor who created the vast Mewar Empire. Maharana Kumbhakarna, or Kumbha as he was called, was the 48th generation of Sisodias who would build Kumbhalgarh.
Maharana Kumbha has much less presence in the imagination of modern India than Maharana Pratap, perhaps because he hasn't had movies made about him in the same way, but it was under whom the Mewar Empire extends its power from Gujarat right through to Madhya Pradesh. And this is probably the maximum moment of power for the Sisodia dynasty.
There was no doubt of Kumbha's acumen as a ruler.
He is powerful in terms of military strength, but he's also got brains, and he uses them. He eventually builds 32 out of the 84 famed forts of Mewar. So all of that is the lifetime of one individual.
Rana Kumbha also created the iconic Vijaya Stambha at Chittorgarh. He was by far the most successful of the Sisodia Empire builders, and yet he's hardly known today.
In a sense, we have to read the ruins of Kumbhalgarh in order to recapture who he is.
Kumbha is a very interesting figure. He's a poet, he's a musician. He is known as a Sangeet Ratnakar, and it's not just his own courtiers, flattering him. His poetry exists, his musical notes exist.
Rana Kumbha commissioned some of the most beautiful temples in Rajputana, both Jain and Hindu. Among more than 70 shrines within Kumbhalgarh is the Bavan Diori temple, named for its 52 resident deities, an artistic work of great magnificence.
One always wonders how forts like this were designed. And you always say, where are the blueprints?
Unfortunately, no blueprints of any form exist of the fort. Did they work with models or drawings? we have no conclusive proof. But we do know that Rana Kumbha had a large team of architects that worked on projects across his empire. In the case of Kumbhalgarh, his chief architect was a man called Mandan. Mandan was the leading architectural mind of his time. Several books written by him on the rules of architecture still exist. Today, almost 600 years later, Kumbha and Mandan's project is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The fort's massive usable area was close to 700 acres, enough to fit 15 Taj Mahals inside. Kumbhalgarh's great strength lay in how effectively its builders used the topography. Blending in with its surroundings, the fort is hardly visible from a distance.
It would have been this place very hard to spot from wherever you were. There were hills around, natural protection, and then you would come across this imposing set of walls.
The walls of Kumbhalgarh are legendary. A giant 36-kilometer ring, looping over the surrounding hills, rising and falling through forests.
The walls of Kumbhalgarh are just magnificent. To me, what's spectacular in a sense isn't the length, which is what the tourist guides always tell you to be impressed by, it's the width.
At places, the walls are almost 15 to 20 feet thick, with walkways wide enough for squadrons of Rajput cavalry.
You can have 8 horsemen riding abreast alongside the top of the wall together. 8 horsemen, so you can imagine the thickness of these great walls. You can fight an entire battle up on top of them.
For an invader, the view from down below was intimidating. The lower sections bulged out, preventing the use of ladders for ingress. The second line of defense were the 7 heavily fortified entranceways.
If you were an enemy, you would have to fight your way in. And Kumbhalgarh had great gates to protect them.
From these vantage points, the defenders would unleash a hell of musket fire, arrows, stones, and boiling oil. Kumbhalgarh fell only once, to Akbar's forces in Maharana Pratap's time. Mughal generals poisoned the water sources, and after a 5-month siege, the Rajputs relented. The walls, however, were never breached throughout the great fort's history. New buildings were added on over the centuries by generations of Sisodia Ranas, including the Badal Mahal in the 18th century, perched on the highest point of the citadel. But the early design that Kumbha commissioned can still be seen. His own living quarters, remarkably simple and austere. In 1468, Rana Kumbha's great reign was to end, not in battle glory, but by murder most foul. Not at the hands of an invading sultan, but by one of his own. Uday Singh, the great Rana's eldest son, made his move while Kumbha was praying. Son murdered father to become the next Rana of Mewar. Such was the lust for power. Centuries later, Rana Kumbha's legend and his legacy live on.